For a majority of the month of December on the live stream, we've been embarking on a challenge that I was calling the No Essence Challenge. We've been leveling and playing a Brewmaster monk since a couple months ago. We got the character to 120, and I said this would be a good combination of multiple things. Another challenge that we had been doing was a fresh character, a character who's just gotten to 120, getting into Mythic Plus, and then we extended that to also just playing the game without any essences. And a lot of the reasons I do these challenges is because it's personally challenging, but also to kind of inspire people to realize that their problems are self-made. You know what I mean? This whole like, I can't do Mythic Plus thing. That's why I would have done a fresh character. It's just not true, right? It's a video game. You can do it. You're just not setting yourself up for success, just like we talked about in the last video. So you're failing because of that, or maybe you're just so scared to try you never even try. So I kind of assumed that this No Essence Challenge was the same thing. It was the same topic, that these people thought that they couldn't succeed on their alts because they didn't have the best power available, and without that best power available, they were going to fail, or they did fail. And now I realize that I kind of set out on a fool's errand. That's never what was happening. And even though I enjoyed doing this challenge, and I did set out with goals that I actually accomplished. Originally, the goal was to complete multiple 15s, multiple 15s in time, of course, as well. Do real keys, you know what I mean? Like actually do serious keys and get to 440 eye level, which I actually did. Now, a lot of this is because of Titan Forging. Without Titan Forging, this would be a lot harder. I mean, I have a lot of gear on that I shouldn't have. Like if there wasn't Titan Forging, I wouldn't be anywhere close to 440. Of course, the neck helps as well. Up until recently, I didn't even do the neck stuff, which I just learned that they changed how it works in BFA. At one point, it was just go to Magni and do it. Now you have to go to Nagitar and do it. So I just elected not to do it. But I finally did it. Got an essence slot available. Just had no essence in the whole time. And the reason I set out on this challenge was because, honestly, it was really disheartening to see how many people on the forums were making these claims, I guess is the best way to put it. And like I said, at first, I thought it was people just selling themselves short. Like, they're like, oh, the game is alt unfriendly. It killed alts. I can't play alts now. So when I hear that, I'm thinking like, okay, well, that's obviously like objectively false, right? And it's just stupid to even say that. So why would they say it? They must be saying it because they are feeling like they're failing on their alts because they can't actually get the power. They don't have the time or the patience to get the power a second time, right? But now I think it's a little bit different. I really do, after talking about the subject and seeing how many people have reacted to this topic over the last few months. Sadly, I think it's a lot more selfish than that. And I don't really want to get into that today, but I do want to talk about why this topic is being misunderstood by a lot of people, and that hopefully after you hear this, you'll understand it better, and you understand why it is the way it is, okay? So maybe something that isn't uniquely obvious to people is that these essences are basically just gear, okay? A lot of people probably don't look at it that way, and the main thing that I would say is, like, unless they like completely change how you play the class, I'm not sure why people react so strongly to the topic. Like, I don't know any essence that does. The ones I use on my DK, it doesn't change how, like, with or without the essences, the character operates the exact same way. Obviously, it's going to be more impactful in some situations, and that's why the essences are cool. Like, maybe there's a situation where I want to use the magic essence. Maybe there's a situation where I want to use the DPS essence. Maybe there's a situation where I want to use, whatever you have. You mix and match them, and that's the functionality of them. To maximize them fully, that's how you use them typically. Not a lot of people do that, frankly. A lot of people are so set in their ways that they think these three are the ones that sim best, so these are the ones I'm only ever going to use for all content. Obviously, that's foolish, but one way or the other, that's what the system was made to be, and it was a direct answer to the failures of Azerite gear, which come in 8.0. A lot of people were very they weren't satisfied with it because they thought like it was supposed to be about mixing and matching, but you couldn't because you got so little of the gear and the traits were so expensive to reroll regularly that was never going to be realistic. So then they made essences, a direct answer to the criticisms people had about 8.0 and 8.1. And now we have more criticisms. People are saying that these systems are not good. Now, first of all, The reason that the systems might seem not good is only because of a lack of perspective from previous expansions. Anybody who actually played Legion and thinks that essences are more prohibitive than legendaries and the systems that were in Legion are just lying. There's no way you could think that, truthfully. There really isn't, because the legendaries in Legion, especially in the beginning, were absolutely spec defining. It's not like the essences are now, where they just kind of give you a little boost in a certain way. There are some essences that do have an impact on your class, but the legendaries in Legion, they literally changed the spec. Like, there was times where it would like the Fire Mage had like 3 or 4 of them that they just completely changed how the class played. There's to my knowledge, there's no essence that does that. Maybe people will come up with reasons why I'm wrong, but either way, it's completely different, okay? And that layer of, truth on that is more important than anything else, because even if they were exactly the same acquiring wise, it would still be more important to have them in Legion than it is in BFA, right? I mean, I don't know how that could not be the case. So, but that's not true. The first part isn't true either, because to actually acquire them in Legion was just completely random. You had no control over which one you got, and you'd almost surely have to do a lot of content that you didn't really want to do. One of the best ways to get legendaries in Legion was to do blast content, which is what they meant was very easy content that you just rolled over in a short period of time very frequently. So it started with the Nether Disruptor in 7.2. Then once they nerfed that, it went on to just like blasting old raids, where you would do like Emerald Nightmare, then Nighthold, then Trial of Valor. You just crushed them. You just like one-shot all the bosses on a relatively easy difficulty, and that would be the best way to acquire BLP. And then, after about a week and a half of doing that, on average, is what if you did every single activity that you could do, and add on approximated that in about a week and a half of this maximization, you would get a legendary. And it might not even be the right legendary, So I don't really see how anybody could say that they're worse. It doesn't really make sense to me, but that's up to you guys. So the problem for me, though, is that people fail to see that they're just legendaries. They really are just gear. They're almost the same. In fact, they're more like regular gear than legendaries were like gear, because they have these tiers, right? And I think that's something that Blizzard implemented because they knew that there was going to be problems with collecting them. So if you have this tier list of kind of, rank 1, rank 2, rank 3, then it's going to be less problematic, because rank 1 is usually about 50% of the essence, right? It's about half of the essence. So, if the essence is good at rank 3, it's probably going to be decent at rank 1 if that's the best you can get. Nobody's satisfied with that, I guess, so whatever, they'll keep working. But that's a big deal, because, a lot of people may not think about that, but that's exactly how gear works now, right? Like, if there's a key trinket, you know what I mean? Like, if I really want the lingering spore pods, well, I can go and get it from a lower key, I can get it from a medium key, I can get it from a higher key. You know what I mean? There's a 410 version of it, there's a 420 version of it, there's a 430 version of it, there's a 440 version of it. And even though it's not directly similar to essences, because essences gain additional power, it's basically the same thing. And this is similar to how Azerite gear works. There's a 4 tiers of Azerite gear exactly as well. Even tier list. Anyway, tier sets. Same thing in Legion. There was a lower version, a medium version, and a high version. And if you wanted the highest version, you had to go play the game. You had to go do the content. And frankly, there was a lot of luck involved. Like, if you wanted a 935 Anger Boda, I had to not only get it to drop, but it had to Warforge. You know what I mean? It had to be better than expected to, like it did happen to me in Legion. So there was a lot of randomness to this, and those items are frankly much more powerful than most essences now. Like, the essence system is good because it's got multiple options, but one single essence doesn't really do as much as people make it sound like it does. And especially the difference between rank 1 of it and rank 3 of it is really not as big of a deal as people make it sound. You can just look at this in math, and I'm sure, again, people will disagree. But for me, at least, the classes that I play, having the difference between a certain exact combo of essences is almost never the reason I succeed. It's like 70% my own play. You know what I mean? What I do with the essences, how I play my class, that's what it is. So whether or not me having them and not having them prevents me from playing the alt successfully, I just think is objectively false, right? I mean, I don't see how that's possible. So That's what we set out to achieve. That's the reason we did this challenge, to show people that they're just thinking about this too closely. They're too focused on maximizing characters that, frankly, they have no business maximizing. It's an alt. If you don't want to spend the time doing content that is going to help you maximize the character, you don't play it very seriously. Again, that's just objective fact. This is nothing to be, frightened by. This is just how the game works. You're not 450 on your alt. You might be switching from a 450 main to a 430 alt. Well, obviously the character's less powerful. That's just how the game works, okay? So the real issue with this is that I hoped that this would stop getting people like so up in arms about things. You know what I mean? I thought what this would do is it would show people that you can play the game and not need these things. And, if you absolutely wanted them, then go and get them, right? Obviously, I wouldn't recommend playing the game without essences because you get a bunch of essences for free. I mean, frankly, like 4 or 5 of them are just literally just log on. You know what I mean? Just do this content every once in a while and you're good. And, the raid one is one of those, honestly. Like, I know maybe next tier it's going to be awkward. I don't really know what to say about that yet, but some of these essences are just participate frequently and you're good. The ones that suck are the rep essences. And I totally sympathize with that. But for me, those ones are kind of the worst ones. Like, I don't know, man. They're okay. The tank one, the magic from Rust Bowl is very good, but I don't know. It's not, I don't know. I don't find them this important. So, so to wrap up this character, I think I did more than I could have. You know what I mean? I really like this character. I could keep playing it, but like, I mean, I'd probably be like, I don't even have a shrine on this character, and it's going to be like almost 13 something with that. So, really, yeah, I could have gotten 15s in time, but it wouldn't change anything. You know what I mean? I proved that the character is very viable. There was some criticism about tank being the easiest role, so then I went to healer. I'm still going to do that a little bit. And then I would also be fine to do some DPS as well. Obviously, DPS is where it becomes an issue, because at that point, your whole job is maximized by your gear. And if you have bad gear, then you're going to not be great at it. Whereas tank, it's not really like that. The base kit is probably much more like 90% of what you need to maximize. And then the gear on top of that is just kind of icing on the cake. So same with the essences. And it's kind of the same with healers. Healers, literally, if they did 0 healing, like you could do a dungeon without a healer. Genuinely, you could do a dungeon without a healer. So that should tell you how not important a healer can be at times, And if that's the case, then that means certainly the healer doesn't need to have the best gear in the game, right? But you can't do a dungeon with no DPS. That's a physical impossibility. You cannot skip every piece of trash. You have to actually kill the mobs, and the faster you kill them, the better. So for sure, any criticism of this would be that this is not feasible on a damage dealer. I would still show that it is, because I think people think the game is harder than it is. Like, I'm sure I can complete 15s in time as a damage dealer without essences, but I would not be pulling my absolute weight. And that's where, hopefully that you see that's the issue with the essences, right? It's about absolute maximization of a spec or a class that you probably don't need to be maximizing. Like, if you're not willing to play the character in this content, then you're probably not very geared. You know what I mean? Like, the character isn't as it's just not set out right. It's an alt. That's just how it is. That's what it's supposed to be. You're not meant to have that power on your alts. So I've maintained that for a while now, and frankly, I'm just really sick of arguing about this. I don't know how so many people don't get it, but one last thing I want to say about it is, like, if you think that this is Blizzard's problem to fix, right? So let's outline the issue here. I think I've done it a little bit here, but let's be very clear, okay? If you're playing a character that's not your main, now, this is a whole different topic. Before we talk about this, another conversation that gets brought up is people who missed 8.2. They have to come back and get all these essences. Well, listen, I have less interest in that, because if you took an entire 8 months off and you come back and you're disappointed that you now have to catch up, I don't have much, I don't know what to say, man. I really don't, because that's disrespectful to the game, frankly. If you think you can take 8 months off and come back at a similar power level to the people who played for 8 months, I don't have any respect for that. But let's not assume that that's being brought up, because a couple people bring it up, but I don't think that's relevant at all. I don't want to talk about that. So what we instead talking about, let's outline the issue here, right? People think that In order to play alts successfully, they have to maximize them, okay? I don't know why this specifically proliferates with essences, but it seems to be a very key concept, even though, again, essences aren't anywhere near as impactful as legendaries, and people had issues with the legendaries, but on top of that, like AP being spec-specific and the actual artifacts being so important as well, it didn't really seem to be that big of a concern. So I think, in general, what's happening here is the game is just less fun for these people overall, and I totally understand that. I love BFA, but I know a lot of people don't. The content can seem stale at times, and especially some of the zones might be frustrating for people. So that's totally, I recognize that. But one way or the other, it's I think that's more it than the actual gearing, because gearing hasn't changed. So this is my primary interest here in this topic, is people who are trying to actually make it sound like just because they cannot maximize their alt without playing it a lot frequently, that the game should change, are failing to understand the topic. Failing to understand the topic, because you don't recognize the fact that there is so much more besides essences in the game that contribute to your power. If that's the case, like if you want to maximize your character like as much as your main, you need to spend hundreds of hours on theory crafting, simming your gear, preparing your character outside of the game, right? To being in a social situation that you're going to be allowed to maximize your character. It's not a single player game. So if you want to be at a capable level as your alt, on your alt as your main, you're going to need to be in a raiding guild or a mythic push team or an arena team that's going to be comparable to your main team, right? And that's something that I don't think people think about. The other big thing here is you're going to have to be as geared, right? Of course, with Titan Forging, and not only that, but the essences require the neck, right? So the neck needs to be 70 at least, obviously now, but it's going to be higher in 8.3. The neck needs to be capped, like that's just the maximize your character has to have a neck that's capped. That's just how the game works. Whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's up to you, but that's just part of it too. So that means you're going to have to spend all this time on doing like islands and doing weekly content to give more AP. Of course, you're going to need your best Azurite gear, and many of that is situational, so you might need 5 to 10 different pieces of Azurite gear to mix and match to make sure that you're good in 5-mans, you're good in raids, you're good in PvP, whatever you're doing. And all along the way, you'd be getting essences. None of this stuff is completely removed from that power gain. So I just don't really get it. It's like people are so focused on essences, but there's so many other things that you have to maximize on your character that are such a bigger hill to climb. Like, okay, so I have a 450 trinket on my Death Knight. Well, now I need to go get that 450 trinket again on my Monk if I want him to be as close to my DK. That's just not going to happen. I just got really lucky on the DK. Like, you know what I mean? I don't think people are... I don't know why. I really don't know why people are so focused on this essence thing. And again, totally naive of me to think setting out on this trip was going to solve it. Because I thought, hey, listen, I'm just going to show you guys. Just relax. I'm going to show you guys you can play. You can play without essences. It's not needed, man. You're going to get some for free anyway. So imagine if I had those, I'd be even better. But that's not what people actually want. So just realize that if you're asking for this and you're serious about it, you need to think about the consequences, because it is basically just gear. Like I said, there's normal, heroic, mythic versions of gear as well. Rank 1, 2, and 3, just like essences. It's the same concept. It interfaces with your character slightly differently, not even that much differently. And frankly, these trinkets that I have are probably more effective than these essences individually. The difference is you have multiple essences, so the combination of them plus the neck and all the power are obviously higher than single pieces of gear. But if you look at them individually, my big trinkets that I have are way more impactful than my essences, especially as a blood DK. So this obviously isn't true for everybody, but this is how it works for me. One way or the other, that's what you're asking for. You're asking for basically every piece of power in the game to be account-wide, and that's not going to happen, okay? If that was the case, the game would be a joke. People who are at the top level, they would literally switch classes based on the situation. Like, there has to be some level of I don't know how to describe it, but you have to actually have a penalty for switching classes in that type of competitive situation, because that's exactly what it would do. If every power gain was account wide on your account, your alt priest that you barely play would be as strong as your main, and you would literally, the priest is like 5% better in the situation, so I'm just going to switch to it, and then I'll be that's how I gain power. That's not how the game works, okay? And I don't think people fully think about that, because it's not just essences. If people got what they wanted here and essences became account wide, what would that do? Tell me genuinely, what would that do for your character? It would make your character like 5% stronger at times than, like, you know, and you wouldn't have to do things that you don't want to do. But it's not going to change how Blizzard works, like the game. You know what I mean? So if this was the case, if all your alts were like just kind of passively 5% stronger, whatever, you know, 15, whatever you think your essences are doing for you based on the different ranks. If that was the case, then they would have to 5%, like things would change to compensate for it. You know what I mean? They're not going to make this change and just allow alts to be that much stronger compared to mains. It's not going to happen. You know, I hope people realize this. So the only thing I could suggest at this point, if after you've seen me play a character with no alts and do a 17 siege, and not, you know, we wiped a lot, but it wasn't like, I feel like I was never the limiting reagent in these keys. As a tank, of course, as a DPS, it would be different. But I did multiple keys that were challenging on many weeks, and even completely undergeared. I have a key that's like 336, and I think it was like a 13 or something like that. And you know, whatever, people help me. I don't know. You want to say I got carried? Say whatever you want. Go ahead and continue to marginalize the efforts I've shown here. But just realize that doing so is only further evidence that Blizzard is not making the wrong decision here. That they know that power is the reason this game is played. So if you don't like playing the game, that's a different story altogether. Suggest ways to make these rep grinds or whatever, these essence acquisitions, more fun. But just realize that if you're asking for them to just be given to you because you got them on an entirely different character, this is not going to happen, because it would open up the same type of situation for gear and other player power to then be BOA, and that would completely ruin the game. Imagine if the neck essences, that's all you have to say. Imagine if, because you have a 70 neck on your main, that you now have a 70 on your alts that literally you've not even logged into. You know what I mean? Like, that's just ridiculous. That's not a reasonable thing to ask, you know, to request. So it's not going to happen. So instead, what they would do, that's what I'm trying to get at here. Instead, what they would do is, if they were going to make them BOA, what they would do is they'd make them have to be earned a second time on your main, and then you could send a token over that would work on your alt. That's how they would do it. That's basically what they did with the legendary system. It's almost exactly what they did with the legendary system in 7.3.5, and I would not be surprised if that's what happens in 8.3.5. If they did do a system like that, where you could somehow re-earn these things on one character and then send them to your alts. That's basically the best you're going to get. Just look at it that way. So are you going to be satisfied with that? If so, it'd probably come with 8.3.5. It's definitely not going to come before that, because again, the world first progression race is done by people who absolutely have to maximize their characters, and giving them the opportunity to maximize their characters easier is not good for anybody. It sounds like it's good, but it's just being selfish. You know, this game is supposed to be a certain type of challenge, so when they're circumventing that certain type of challenge by having 9 different characters that they could select from, and now you're making those 8 of those characters much stronger than they should be, it's devaluing the purpose of the game's design. So I don't know, that's everything I have to say. So just realize that, be careful what you ask for, okay? The more power they give for less, the worse the game is going to get, because it's going to make more and more busy work. It's going to be like, oh, well, now I'm more powerful, but the game has to compensate for that in some way. So just trying to think, if I got these essences on alts, what would change? Because it's not going to not change. That's not how Blizzard works, okay? So if you despise the company because of this, I can't help you. That's all I'm saying. So anyway, I did my part here. I proved that you can easily play the game and accomplish things without essences. Obviously, there's no reason to use no essences. I happily can get more, and the character would get that much more powerful. So that's it for the Monk. I probably won't play it again, maybe ever. I don't really like Monk, frankly. It was just the character that we actually had a vote, and people voted on it. I would have preferred to do Bear. You know, some of the criticisms were also that Monk is really strong under geared at low power levels, and that was certainly true. I totally agree with that. So if I could do it all over again, I definitely would have did Bear Druid. The only thing I was concerned with was that I already had an essence slotted, but it was the weakest of all the essences, and it was only rank 1, so I'd hope that people wouldn't be upset. But again, we're always overthinking things, so I don't want people to have any type of leg to stand on if I can, you know, knock that leg out. So anyway, that's it. We're going to continue with the Druid, and I might try Windwalker too, but at this point we only have 2 weeks left. The next stream, I don't know exactly what I'll do, but that's that. So let me know what you guys think, and Yeah, the best way we can approach the future of this topic is think about what it would look like if you got what you asked for and how the game would change. The game's not just going to give you free stuff. It would have to change around it. So, maybe there's better solutions, because obviously, it would be cool if there was a way that I could use time investment on the character I prefer to play to send some type of advantage to the character that I do like to play, but I'd rather play my main instead. That's a good solution. You know what I mean? It'd be cool if you could do that on your main, and that's exactly what they're doing for the reps. You can grind mana pearls on your main, you could grind the token, whatever, for a rust ball on your main, send that to your alt. That's the kind of solution that Blizzard is they're actually open to. So let's think about that.